Dr. Anderson says, my basic proposal is that genuine theological paradoxes such as the Christian doctrine of the Trinity are best understood as merely apparent contradictions resulting from unarticulated equivocation. Notice that is the acronym. Merely is the M, apparent is the A, contradictions is the C, resulting is the R, from is not represented, but unarticulated is the U. I'm sorry, yes, resulting is the R, unarticulated is the U, and E is equivocation. So we have to remind ourselves that for people like Dr. Tuggy, who is an analytic philosopher, a trained theologian, but is used to pouring through information from the logical perspective, then the Trinitarian position is illogical because of the contradictions when describing identity and talking about absolute identity theory and how two things cannot be identical to one another and yet differ in any way and things like that. And so there is an approach to the Bible that I believe it might be Dr. Anderson, it might be a different gentleman that we'll look at later on, but it's an approach known as the puzzler approach, where a person is likened to a puzzler, a person who appreciates puzzles or likes to solve puzzles. And he takes the Bible and begins looking at all the data related to God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, and he's pondering the concept of the nature of God, right? The ontological makeup of this being known as God. And from a puzzle perspective, he's trying to put all the puzzle pieces of the puzzle together and make sure they snap together tightly, like you would build a puzzle. And when he comes to the definition of God and the identity of God and the definition of Jesus and the identity of Jesus, he can't snap those two pieces of the puzzle together cleanly because there is information related to these two persons that on one hand seems to agree, but on the other hand seems to disagree. And so the puzzle doesn't snap together cleanly for him. And so from his perspective as a puzzler, he's left with the conclusion that these two pieces don't fit together. That is to say, we must have a puzzle piece from another puzzle that's gotten mixed up in the box of this first puzzle, and so he can't snap the piece of the puzzle known as God with the piece of the puzzle known as Jesus. And so Tuggy is representative of one who would approach the Bible from a puzzler perspective. Dr. Anderson, by comparison, does not take the puzzler approach. He takes what we're going to call as the Mysterian approach. And so he recommends that we look at the Bible not from a puzzler perspective, which creates paradoxes that are unsettling to us, but instead we take the Mysterian approach that allows for the tension created by paradoxes to both coexist at the same time and yet still be part of the same truth of the Bible. Dr. Anderson continues, the logical conflict in question is rarely, if ever, explicit, i.e., the Son is God and the Son is not God, right? We don't usually have the argument going that way. We have shades of disagreement. Jesus is the Son, but Jesus is God, but in what way is he God? Like that. So let's continue. He says the logical conflict in question is rarely, if ever, explicit, but it may constitute a formal contradiction, as seems to be the case with a set of claims that a leading analytic Christian philosopher analyzes. I think he's talking about Dr. Tuggy there, but I'm not sure. I have to go back and look at the original quote. In other cases, Dr. Anderson states, the perceived contradiction will be merely implicit, but no less awkward for that. Moreover, Anderson says, these apparent contradictions in our formulations of Christian doctrine will be the product of theological theorizing from source data that also strikes us as implicitly contradictory. Again, he's just challenging us with the idea that when we read through the Bible at a face value level, it's natural for us to read statement A on the left side of the page and then statement B on the right side of the page and begin to scratch our head and say, how can both of these statements be reconciled with one another? Don't they contradict one another? It's as if we read on the left side of the page that God is God, and then we read on the right side of the page that Jesus is God. Then we have to say, who's the God on the one side of the page? God is God, Jesus the Father is God on the left side of the page, and Jesus is God on the right side of the page. Does this mean that Jesus is the Father? Right? It begins to cause us to wonder out loud what's going on. Anderson continues, after all, the Bible nowhere makes any explicitly or formally contradictory statements about God's triune nature, but rather supplies copious data about God from which we infer the sort of neat, succinct set of statements which serve as a formal statement of orthodox Trinitarian belief, such as the Athanasian Creed, right? It would be nice if the Bible simply came out, like I said earlier in previous teachings, that where the Bible explicitly said, God is one, but God is three. He is one God as a being, but three persons in his nature. Jesus is God in nature, and in person. The Father is God in nature and in person, and the Holy Spirit is God in person and in nature. And the way you can understand it is that He's one, yet three, yet one. We don't have verses that are described exactly the way that I just described. We do have this language showing up in the creeds, like the Athanasian Creed.